Oh, good evening, everybody. Just great to be in London and back in London again. I've been here many times because the AMO conference is often held in London. Beautiful city. And I want to congratulate you on the challenge that you've undertaken, that you've recognized and are doing something about it, and that is to deal with public transit. Now, I'm not going to tell you about the wonderful things we did in Mississauga, because we did do some wonderful things. I want you to benefit from the mistakes we made, because I think that is really what London is looking for, is to, Waterloo is quite different to Mississauga. London is quite different. I often said I would love to be mayor of London. And one of the reasons is you're not next to Toronto. Because the city of Mississauga is next to Toronto. And there are advantages to being next to Toronto, and there are great disadvantages of being next to Toronto. And that is the problem that we have faced with transit. First of all, the 19th century, railroads was built in this country. And think of the vision of the people that saw fit to build 2 rail lines all across Canada, when the population, I guess, was 10 million? We can't even have the vision in the Greater Toronto area to build an LRT today because of the confusion and the disagreement and the politicians not being able to get together to decide what the priorities are to move more people and to move goods and services. Because you've got to move goods and services as well as people. And if you have a good transit system, then the goods and services can move more efficiently. So it's tied together, the movement of people and the movement of goods and services. Well, being next to Toronto, we don't have integrated transit in the GTA. You see, you don't know when you cross the border from Mississauga to Toronto. I'm sure many of you drive from London and you don't know whether you're in Mississauga or in Toronto. That's how close we are. And can you believe that we don't have integrated transit with the TTC? So our buses that take 12,000 people to the Islington subway in the morning, they have to close the doors when they cross the border, and after they leave the Islington subway, they got to close the doors. They can't take anybody on until they get back across the boundary into Mississauga. Isn't that interesting? Now, we have integrated transit with Brampton, and we have it with Oakville. Buses come down to our center, and our buses go up there. So our situation is quite different. But let me tell you also about the development of Mississauga. We're almost fully developed. All land has been approved for development, except industrial commercial. We have about 4,000 acres to develop, but residential is all. So now we have to deal with the movement of people and the movement of goods and services with a complete. London is only growing. You're lucky to be only growing, because the 20th century, we built roads. Roads was the thing. The 21st century, we will be building massive public transit systems. You see, the thing has changed drastically. The opinion of people have changed. I mean, what did we develop Mississauga? We developed Mississauga beautifully. Mostly in the 6,000 acres that the 2 large developers own was residential, single-family homes with beautiful cul-de-sacs and crescents. how do you ever get a bus around a cul-de-sac and across? But that was the desire of people then. That was the desire of people. They didn't want to live in high-rises, the people that moved to Mississauga. They wanted to live in a single-family home. Many immigrants had gone to Toronto. They worked hard. They rented. They built up a little nest egg, and now they want their single-family home. So they moved to Mississauga. They moved to Vaughan, and they moved to Markham. If the developers had built high-rises, they would have remained vacant, because that was not the desire of the people at the time. But the desire of people is changing, and you are at the time, London is now at the period when people are changing. How many bicycles paths were there in Mississauga until recently? None. And now we're trying to build bicycle paths along our roads, and they're not safe because the width is not there to build an adequate, safe bicycle lanes. But we're trying to do it in the best way we can. Why did this happen? Well, quite honestly, when we were developing, and we led Canada for some 10 years, taking in 30 to 40,000 people a year, transportation planners and land use planners never worked together. They had their own desire. Yes, they built roads. Oh, it was very important to be a road out in front of the houses. And they built sidewalks, etc. But there was no real vision of public transit at that time. So how did we develop? Well, we developed that way, without an adequate transportation plan, except roads. We didn't build, there wasn't a road in Mississauga that had a bicycle path on it. Oh, we had bicycle paths in the parks, yes, but not on the roads. And now we're trying to build bicycle paths along the roads. The road wasn't built for it. And so London and other municipalities like Kitchener-Waterloo have the opportunity that as they expand and grow, they have the opportunity to build into the growth the necessary transit requirements today and the bicycle paths, etc. So you have an opportunity second to none to learn from our mistakes in the city of Mississauga. And secondly, we're now into high-rise development along the major corridors, etc. But it's costing a lot of money to convert to transit, not just building it, in order to convert our roads. Engineers, let me tell you about engineers. They built roads and intersections, square. Now we're converting all our major corridors, just have a little turnoff so the cars can turn and not wait. In fact, in regard to road signs, it's interesting. Street signs are at the intersection. Isn't that interesting? So you drive up to the intersection and you think, oh yeah, I'm at Main Street. And I don't know, now I know I'm at Main Street, but I'm stopped at the intersection. Now we put signs way back on the road to say, Main Street is you're just approaching Main Street. So drivers can determine whether they want to turn right on Main Street or left on Main Street. There's so many simple things we can do to move traffic in our cities that we haven't done before. Laybys for buses. We didn't have those. We're building them now so that the bus can go off the road and let the passengers on and off and then come back into the lane. So engineers are to blame as well, by the way. Let me tell you, I often say to our engineers, you're building a sidewalk, you're going to build a sidewalk and there's a tree. They'd cut the tree down before they'd find a way to go around it. Isn't that true? So there's been a major change. Oh, engineers. There's been a major change in the staffing of the different departments of the city. They're working more closely together. I don't recall for years that any report that came from our planning department on the development to be approved, that there was any mention of transit. None at all. Oh, they made sure there was a road there. No question about it. That was pretty essential. But never was transit ever mentioned. That is changing in a big way. The planning report now that comes to the city of Mississauga not only deals with transit, a good transit and a complete, and bicycle paths, etc. But it's kind of late because we're fully developed now. So we're going to have to go back and make the changes that you in London can benefit from. Transportation should be the basic condition included in every planning report that comes forward for development, to show how the community. Secondly, we built subdivisions, and we made sure that the industrial and commercial was way over there, and the residential was way over here. No thought given as to how the people would get from here to there to work. That's all changed. And isn't it wonderful that it's changed? And you have the opportunity as London to make those changes as you grow, and so is Kitchener-Waterloo. We don't have that opportunity anymore because we're fully developed. Secondly, in regard to the Greater Toronto Area, we're talking about the big move that Metrolinx is coming up with. Thank God we have GO Transit in the Greater Toronto Area, and by the way, it's extended to Kitchener-Waterloo. GO Transit is the best thing since sliced bread. No question about it. No question about it. And we have rail lines. We closed rail lines. Isn't that interesting? And now GO Transit is one of the best rail lines we have. We closed them up because we felt they weren't necessary. So things have changed, and the attitude of people have changed. You know, it's interesting. The gridlock in the GTA, to be even stopped from getting worse, is a multi-billion-dollar project. Think about it. Not to cure it, just to stop it in the Greater Toronto Area. And when it comes to the question, who's going to pay for it? I say to my people in Mississauga, you have two choices. One, to do nothing about gridlock and just let it grow. It affects the health, affects our health plan in a major way, the stress. It's now starting to affect our economic development because companies don't want to locate in an area where congestion exists. So it's affecting our economic development, etc. But you have two choices. Do nothing about it, or do something about it and help pay for it. I don't know what the people of London think, but the property tax cannot afford to build the necessary transit that you're going to need in the London area. And until we can convince the federal and provincial government to put money into transit in a major way, and especially the federal government, many of the projects that you're going to look at and many of the projects that we're looking at in the Greater Toronto Area are not going to be built. And it's interesting how people will say, oh, I don't want my taxes to go up. And yet they want those services that are so necessary to the success, and especially the economic success of a city. So London has an opportunity. An opportunity, and other cities have an opportunity. Now, the question is, we haven't had, 20 years ago, I sat on a committee set up, I think it was the Bob Rae government, if I remember, to look at transit line from the center of Toronto to the airport 20 years ago. We hope to open it next year. Think about it. There's been a lot of planning, but there hasn't been the vision and there hasn't been the desire on the part of the taxpayers to help pay for the projects that are necessary. And so that is why in the Greater Toronto Area we have gridlock second to none. And I emphasize again that unless the citizens of the Greater Toronto Area, unless the province has the backbone to say we're going to have to collect some tax to pay for the gridlock, to ease the gridlock in the GTA, then these projects are not going to be built. There's no question about it. And so there is a challenge. I hope the people of London will realize that these projects need money to be built, and that your taxes are either going to go up or there's going to have to be a special levy in order to assist with the building of the projects. But you have an opportunity. I love your title, Shift. I think it's just great. And I hope that through the planning process, that the transportation will become a major portion of the approval of any growth in the City of London, as it wasn't in the City of Mississauga. So you have an opportunity to change. Other cities have taken the bull by the horns, like Vancouver and other areas, and there's been a charge for it. There's been a levy. There's no question about it, in order to do what has to be done. If transportation had been the basis of the land use approval in the City of Mississauga, then it would be less costly, very much less costly, to build the transit services that we need now. And so I'm saying to London, don't make that mistake, please. Make sure, and to the citizens that are here tonight, become very involved. Well, how do you start a transit system? Well, first of all, you have to get buses. By the way, I have to say, the TTC that you hear so much about, a number of years ago was considered the best transit system in North America. I bet you don't remember that. And Toronto people don't remember it either. And as a result of the lack of the necessary funding from the provincial government, because the Harris government cut off all our transit funding, they cut off our subsidy to buy buses, they cut off our assistance to the deficit, because no transit system pays its way. Go Transit is the best paying system. I think there are 85 cents now out of every dollar is paid for by the users. Ours right now is 48 paid by the users and 52% subsidize the transit fares. As a result of the lack of funding from the provincial government, the TTC now is considered in pretty bad shape. It's been allowed to depreciate. And now to build it up, it takes more money now than it would have been if it had been properly maintained. And so you see, when you neglect your infrastructure, and especially neglect your transit system. So as a result, I sent a dinner tonight. I represented Canada at the International Transit Association in the United States. This is about 10 years ago. And I used to go down and they would talk about the billions that the federal government of the United States gave to municipalities to build transit. And they would ask me, what does Canada do? Zero. That's what's happening. There's a federal election next year. And I hope that the people of London will stand up and be counted and let the federal government know that we need funding to the municipalities to build the infrastructure, of which transit is a major portion, and all other infrastructure that's required in order, because we cannot do it on the property tax. We just can't. Thank God we now get fuel tax, or gas tax, the municipalities, both federal and provincial. And we have invested every nickel the city gets of the gas tax into transit. And yes, to start, you start with buses. And then, in my opinion, to go to bus rapid transit, which we just opened in November. And when you build your bus rapid transit, make sure that it can be converted to LRT. And now we're looking at building an LRT on our main thoroughfare here on Ontario Street, working with Brampton, two municipalities working together to build an LRT if we can ever get the funding from the provincial government to do it, etc. We've spent a lot of money getting ready for it, so that when they make an announcement that we can say, well, we have a project ready to go, so we need the money. So I say to the people of London tonight, and to the staff, please make sure that your transit, I think your plan is great, and keep the public involved. And to the public I say, just remember that every dollar that you invest in transit will pay off in the future. Secondly, if you want economic development in your municipality, I visit the large companies in Mississauga, and I visit the medium-sized companies in Mississauga. I have round tables with them, and I list all the issues that come up. Guess which issue is at the top of the agenda with the large corporations, like the pharmaceutical companies, and we have some very large ones in Mississauga, and the medium-sized companies? Transit. And transit will determine how adequate, if you have an adequate transit system, in my opinion, the possibility of you attracting economic development to your city is very essential. So, ladies and gentlemen, I say to you tonight, get behind SHIFT. Get behind the plan of your city to build a transit system. If you don't do it now, it'll cost you twice as much later down the road as it's costing the city of Mississauga to build an adequate transit system to service. And remember, not just to move people, to move goods and services within your city. Because if you have an adequate, very, very successful transit system, it allows your goods and services to move more quickly. So, your challenge is there. I wish you every success. And just remember the mistakes we made. Please, London, don't make those same mistakes to both the staff of the city and the citizens of the city. Because for the staff to come up with the plan and to implement it, it needs the support of the citizens to say, yes, that's a visionary plan, and we're behind it to make it happen, so that we will not make the mistakes that other cities have made by it costing even more to go back and correct the errors that were made. Thank you for inviting me. It's been great to be in London.